The morning sun shone through the tall glass windows of the city's tallest office tower. Inside the top floor, a woman sat at her desk, her eyes fixed on the endless stream of reports, charts, and emails flashing across her computer screen. Her name was Eleanor, the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the country. People described her as brilliant, powerful, and unstoppable. She had built her reputation with years of hard work and determination, and nothing seemed to shake her confidence. But to those who worked under her, Eleanor was not a warm figure. Her face rarely carried a smile, and her tone was often sharp. In meetings, she demanded perfection. In the hallways, employees stood a little straighter when she passed, afraid that even the smallest mistake might catch her attention. Many admired her strength, but at the same time, many feared her. She had become a symbol of success and discipline, but not of kindness. Eleanor herself had gotten used to this image. She believed that being tough was the only way to keep the company running smoothly. Every day, she arrived before the sun rose and stayed long after the city lights began to twinkle outside her window. Her desk was always filled with neatly stacked papers, her phone constantly buzzing with urgent calls, and her calendar packed with back-to-back meetings. It seemed like her entire life was a race against time. Behind her cold exterior, however, was a different truth. Eleanor carried a silent loneliness in her heart. She lived in a beautiful apartment filled with expensive furniture and stunning views, yet when she returned home each night, the silence of the empty rooms pressed heavily against her. She often stood by the window, staring at the glowing city below, and wondered if all her success had come at a cost. She had given up friendships, missed family gatherings, and even let go of the simple joy of sharing laughter with loved ones. But Eleanor rarely let these thoughts linger. Each time her heart began to ache with emptiness, she quickly reminded herself of her responsibilities. She had thousands of employees depending on her decisions. She had investors waiting for results. She had a company's future resting on her shoulders. So she put her feelings aside, straightened her back, and pushed herself harder. Smiles and laughter, she told herself, were luxuries she could no longer afford. One morning, she walked into the company lobby. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, and her assistants rushed behind her, carrying files and whispering about schedules. Employees lined up near the reception desk, preparing for an important event that day. The lobby buzzed with excitement, but as soon as Eleanor entered, the energy shifted. Conversations quieted, and all eyes turned toward her. Some greeted her politely, but most simply lowered their gaze, waiting for her to pass. This reaction had become normal for Eleanor. She hardly noticed any more. In her mind, it was better to be respected than to be liked. Respect kept the company running, respect kept people working hard. And so she continued walking with her usual serious face, barely glancing at anyone around her. What she did not realize was how differently her employees saw her. To many of them, she seemed untouchable, like a queen sitting on a throne high above everyone else. They admired her, yes, but they also felt distant from her. They whispered about her in the break room, wondering if she ever laughed or if she even knew what it felt like to struggle the way they did. Some even said she must not understand ordinary life anymore, because she had lived in success for so long. Yet Eleanor was human, just like them. She too had once known struggle. She had grown up in a small neighborhood where her parents worked hard to make ends meet. Her mother, especially, had been her guiding light. She used to tell Eleanor, no matter how hard life gets, never forget to smile. A smile gives strength to you and to the people around you. Eleanor had carried those words in her heart as a child. But somewhere along the road of climbing the corporate ladder, those words had faded into the background. Now, when she thought about her mother, she remembered the advice but could not bring herself to live by it. The truth was, Eleanor's smile had not disappeared because she didn't want it. It had disappeared because she had locked it away, thinking it was weakness. She had convinced herself that strength meant seriousness, that compassion meant losing control, and that success demanded sacrifice. And so she lived her life without the warmth of a smile, believing that this was the only way forward. On that particular morning, as she stepped into the elevator that would take her to her office, she caught her reflection in the glass. For a moment, she paused. The woman staring back at her looked powerful, yes, but also tired. There were faint lines around her eyes, and her lips seemed permanently pressed into a straight line. She almost did not recognize herself. It struck her that this face, the face that employees saw every day, was the same face she saw at night when she was alone. And suddenly, she felt a sharp pang of emptiness again. But the elevator doors opened, her assistant reminded her of the schedule, and just like that, she pushed the thought aside. As the day went on, Eleanor buried herself in her work as usual. Meetings stretched into the afternoon, phone calls came one after another, and her desk grew cluttered with documents demanding her attention. She didn't notice the small details around her: the nervous laughter of employees waiting to see her, the tired eyes of workers who had stayed late, or even the tiny child who had quietly entered the building that day with her mother. That child would soon change everything. But in that moment, Eleanor could not see it coming. She was too busy building her walls higher, too busy proving to the world that she was strong. She had no idea that a small hand, a soft voice, and the innocence of a child were about to touch her life in a way she would never forget. The afternoon light streamed through the large windows of the company lobby. It was a special day for the employees, because the CEO was making an appearance downstairs before an important board meeting. The lobby was busier than usual, filled with workers carrying files, answering phones, or waiting for her arrival. The energy in the air was a mix of nervousness and respect, because whenever Eleanor walked through, everyone seemed to hold their breath. Among the crowd stood a woman named Clara, an employee from the finance department. She was hardworking, polite, and always on time, but life outside the office was not easy for her. Clara was a single mother raising her daughter, Lily, who was just 5 years old. That morning, Clara had not been able to find anyone to watch her daughter. The babysitter had cancelled at the last moment, and she had no choice but to bring Lily with her to work for a short while. She hoped no one would notice, especially not the CEO. Clara held Lily's hand tightly, whispering to her, "Please be quiet, sweetheart. Mommy just needs to finish this, and then we'll go home." Lily nodded but looked around the big lobby with wide eyes. Everything seemed magical to her: the shiny marble floor, the tall plants, and the busy grown UPS rushing past in fancy clothes. She was a curious child, full of life, and it was hard for her to stay still. While Clara tried to focus on the papers she carried, Lily noticed the huge glass doors suddenly open. A group of assistants rushed in, followed by a tall, serious woman in a dark suit. Everyone in the lobby instantly grew quiet, and the air felt heavier. It was Eleanor, the CEO. Her heels clicked against the floor, and her presence alone made people straighten their backs and lower their voices. To Lily, who had never seen her before, the woman looked important but also a little sad. Lily tugged at her mother's hand and whispered, "Who is she?" Clara's face turned pale. "That's my boss," she answered quickly. "Please don't say anything, Lily. Just stay close." But children do not see the world the way adults do. Where the employees saw power, distance, and fear, Lily only saw a lady who looked lonely. While everyone else avoided Eleanor's gaze, Lily watched her closely. She noticed that the woman's eyes did not shine with happiness. She noticed that her lips were pressed into a straight line, almost as if she had forgotten how to smile. As Eleanor walked past the line of employees, she barely looked at anyone. Her mind was already busy with the meeting ahead. She was thinking about numbers, decisions, and strategies, not the people standing around her. To her, this moment was just another step in her busy day. But then, something unexpected happened. Just as Eleanor passed by Clara, little Lily slipped her small hand free from her mother's grip. Before Clara could stop her, the child stepped forward with her tiny shoes clicking softly against the marble. She reached up with both hands and gently touched Eleanor's hand. The room seemed to freeze. Every employee stared, their eyes wide with shock. No one had ever dared to touch the CEO like that. Eleanor stopped in her tracks, surprised by the sudden contact. She looked down and saw a pair of innocent eyes gazing up at her. Lily's face was open, sweet, and full of honesty. Without hesitation, the child spoke in her clear little voice. "Mommy needs a smile." The words echoed in the silent lobby. For a moment, no one knew what to do. Clara gasped, her heart racing with fear. She quickly tried to pull Lily back, whispering apologies. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. She didn't mean to, please forgive her." But Eleanor wasn't angry. She stood still, staring at the little girl as if she had just heard something she had forgotten long ago. The child's words cut through the noise of her mind, through the layers of stress and seriousness she had built around herself. She felt the warmth of the small hand holding hers, and it was as if time had slowed down. Employees exchanged nervous glances. Some thought the CEO would scold the mother. Others feared Clara might lose her job. But what happened next surprised everyone. Eleanor bent down slightly, so her eyes were level with Lily's. For the first time in years, her face softened. She studied the child carefully, almost as if she wanted to memorize the moment. Then she asked gently, "Why do you say that, little one?" Lily blinked, not afraid at all. She pointed at her mother, who stood trembling nearby. "Because she works very hard, and when she comes home, she looks tired. I think she just needs someone to smile at her." The words were simple, but they carried a weight Eleanor could not ignore. She turned her eyes toward Clara, who stood frozen with tears welling up in her eyes. Clara tried to explain, her voice shaky. "Please forgive her, ma'am. She doesn't understand." But Eleanor understood. She understood more than she wanted to admit. She saw in Clara the same exhaustion she often felt herself. She saw the sacrifices of a mother trying to give her child a better life. And she remembered her own mother's voice from long ago, reminding her that smiles bring strength. For a long moment, Eleanor said nothing. She just held the child's hand and let the words sink deep into her heart. The lobby was so quiet that even the ticking of the big wall clock could be heard. Everyone waited, unsure of what the CEO would do. Finally, Eleanor did something no one expected. Her lips curved upward, and for the first time in years, she smiled. It was not a practiced smile for a camera or a polite smile for a meeting. It was small, genuine, and real. And that single smile lit up her face in a way that shocked the people around her. Lily beamed back at her, happy and proud. "See? You can smile," she said cheerfully. The assistants looked at one another, unsure how to react. Clara covered her mouth with her hand, tears now rolling down her cheeks, not from fear but from relief and emotion. Eleanor slowly let go of Lily's hand, but the warmth remained in her heart. She nodded to Clara softly, signaling that everything was fine. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the elevator, but her expression was no longer the same. Something inside her had shifted. As the elevator doors closed, Eleanor found herself touching her hand where the little girl had held it. It was such a small gesture, yet it carried a power that no meeting, no report, no business achievement had ever given her. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of something she thought she had lost: human connection. Back in the lobby, employees whispered to each other in amazement. They had just witnessed a moment they would never forget. Some smiled themselves, others shook their heads in disbelief, and many silently admired the little girl's courage. Clara hugged her daughter tightly, whispering, "You don't know what you've done today, Lily. You don't know." But Lily only giggled, happy that the serious lady had finally smiled. None of them knew it yet, but that innocent moment, the touch of a child's hand and the request for a smile, was about to change the way the CEO saw everything. That night, Eleanor sat in her apartment, but the usual silence felt different. She had taken off her suit jacket, placed it neatly on the chair, and poured herself a glass of water. Normally, her evenings were the same: a quiet dinner, unfinished work, and staring out at the glowing city lights from her window. But this time, she could not stop replaying the afternoon in her mind. The image of the little girl, her tiny hand, and those innocent words kept echoing inside her. "Mommy needs a smile." She whispered it to herself as if testing the weight of the sentence. It sounded simple, almost too simple. But the way the child had said it, direct, honest, and without hesitation, made it impossible to ignore. For years, Eleanor had trained herself to hide emotions. She believed that showing softness in business was weakness. But now she realized something unsettling. A child, who had no idea about corporate rules or power, had seen through her in a single glance. The little girl had not asked about money, success, or results. She had only asked for a smile, not even for herself, but for her mother. That touched something deep inside Eleanor's heart. As she sat by the window, Eleanor thought of her own mother. She remembered being a small girl herself, sitting on the floor while her mother cooked in their small kitchen. Her mother always hummed softly and smiled even when life was hard. "Smiles are not only for happy times," she had once told Eleanor. "Smiles are what give us the strength to survive the hard times." Those words suddenly returned to Eleanor with full force. She realized she had lost that simple lesson along the way. Somewhere between board meetings, business deals, and the pressure of success, she had forgotten how to let herself be human. She had forgotten how to smile, not just for herself but for the people who looked up to her. That night, sleep did not come easily. She lay in bed, restless, turning from side to side. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's face, pure and full of kindness. And she saw Clara's eyes, tired but hopeful, eyes that reflected the same exhaustion Eleanor often felt but never admitted. The more she thought, the more she understood that this was not just about one child or one employee. It was about everyone who worked in her company, people who gave their time and energy every day but rarely felt truly seen. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the office earlier than usual. Her assistants were surprised to see her already sitting at her desk when they walked in. But what shocked them even more was the way she greeted them. Instead of her usual serious nod, she looked up and offered a small but genuine smile. "Good morning," she said warmly. It was such a simple thing, but it left them speechless. All day, Eleanor found herself noticing things she had ignored before. She noticed the tired expression on a young intern's face as he rushed to deliver files. She noticed the nervousness of a receptionist answering multiple calls at once. She noticed the quiet sigh of an employee who stayed late to finish her work. Each detail, small as it was, struck her in a way it never had before. During lunch, she sat in her office but could not focus on her food. Instead, she kept thinking about Clara and Lily. She wondered what kind of life Clara lived outside these office walls. Did she go home and cook dinner with the little energy she had left? Did she stay awake at night worrying about bills or her child's future? Eleanor realized she had never truly thought about the personal lives of her employees. She had seen them only as workers, not as people with families, struggles, and dreams. That realization shook her. She began to understand that leadership was not only about profits, reports, and strategies. It was also about people. And people needed more than strict rules and high expectations. They needed compassion, understanding, and sometimes just a smile to remind them that their efforts mattered. Later that week, Eleanor called a meeting with her senior managers. As they gathered in the conference room, they prepared themselves for her usual firm tone and long list of demands. But when Eleanor entered, there was a different energy in the room. She looked around, met their eyes, and for the first time, she began the meeting with gratitude. "Before we start, "I want to thank each of you," she said. "I know how much effort you put in, and I don't say it often enough." The managers were stunned. Some shifted in their seats, unsure how to respond. But slowly, they relaxed. The atmosphere in the room felt lighter than it had in years. Eleanor continued, talking not only about business goals but also about the importance of supporting the people behind the work. She spoke about balance, well-being, and the need to recognize human struggles. Her words came from a place of genuine reflection, inspired by that one moment in the lobby. She didn't mention Lily directly, but in her heart, she knew the child's voice was guiding her. That night, after the meeting, Eleanor went home and opened a drawer she hadn't touched in years. Inside was a small photo frame of her younger self with her mother. In the picture, her mother had a wide smile, and little Eleanor was laughing beside her. She touched the photo gently, tears forming in her eyes. "I forgot, Mom," she whispered. "I forgot how important this was." The next day, something unexpected happened. As Eleanor walked through the office, employees noticed something different about her. Her steps were still confident, but her face was softer. She greeted people, made small comments, and even smiled at a group of workers she passed by. The change was subtle, but it spread quickly. People began to whisper to each other, "Did you see her smile today? And she seems different." For Eleanor, the change was not easy. It required her to fight years of habit. Many times, she almost slipped back into her old cold ways. But every time she felt herself hardening again, she remembered Lily's small hand and her innocent voice. That memory kept her grounded. One evening, after another long day, Eleanor found herself walking out of the building when she saw Clara waiting by the doors with Lily. Clara immediately stood nervously, unsure if the CEO would be upset. But to her surprise, Eleanor walked up to them with a gentle expression. She bent down and said to Lily, "You reminded me of something very important the other day." "Thank you." Lily smiled brightly, holding her mother's hand. Clara's eyes widened, but this time there was no fear, only gratitude. Eleanor nodded to Clara and said, "You're doing a good job. I see it now." Those words, though simple, brought tears to Clara's eyes. For years, she had worked hard without recognition, but that single acknowledgement from her boss meant more than she could describe. As Eleanor walked away, she realized something powerful. Strength did not only come from discipline and hard work. Real strength also came from kindness, from connecting with others, and from allowing herself to be human. She finally understood what her mother had tried to teach her, and what Lily had reminded her of with just one sentence. That night, as she looked out at the city from her window, the view seemed brighter. The silence of her apartment didn't feel as heavy. She smiled to herself not because everything was perfect, but because she had rediscovered something she thought she had lost forever. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the company had experienced before. Employees who had worked under Eleanor for years noticed a change that at first seemed almost unbelievable. She still carried the same strong presence, still spoke with confidence, and still demanded excellence, but there was something softer in her tone, something warmer in her eyes. For the first time, her staff began to feel like she saw them not only as workers but also as people. It started with small gestures. One morning, Eleanor walked into the office and instead of heading straight to her desk, she paused at the reception desk where a young woman was answering calls. "Good morning," Eleanor said, offering a genuine smile. The receptionist was so surprised that she nearly dropped the phone. For years, the CEO had passed her countless times without a word, and now here she was, acknowledging her. That single moment left the receptionist glowing for the rest of the day. In meetings, too, Eleanor began to act differently. She still expected high standards, but instead of focusing only on mistakes, she made an effort to recognize the hard work behind the results. When a junior employee nervously presented a new idea, she listened patiently and even encouraged him to continue, something she would never have done before. The team left that meeting whispering among themselves, amazed by the change. But the real difference came when Eleanor began to rethink how the company functioned. She remembered Lily's words and Clara's tired eyes, and she realized that many of her employees were silently struggling, balancing demanding jobs with family responsibilities, health issues, or personal challenges. Until then, the company's culture had been one of strict deadlines and long hours, with little room for personal life. Eleanor had believed that this was necessary for success. But now she began to see that pushing people too hard without caring for their well-being was not strength, it was blindness. So she called her leadership team together. As they sat around the polished conference table, they prepared themselves for another serious discussion about numbers and goals. Instead, Eleanor spoke about something entirely new. "I want us to think about the people behind the work," she said. "They give us their time, their energy, and their talent. But they are also mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. They have lives outside these walls. And we need to respect that." The managers exchanged surprised looks. Some nodded immediately, while others hesitated, unsure if she truly meant it. But Eleanor's expression left no doubt. She was serious. She outlined new ideas, flexible schedules for parents, wellness programs for staff, mental health support, and recognition for hard work beyond just financial rewards. At first, some managers worried this would weaken the company's discipline. They thought employees might take advantage of the kindness. But Eleanor responded firmly. "Caring for people does not make us weak. It makes us stronger. A company grows not only through profits but also through loyalty and trust. If we show them that we value them as humans, they will give us their best not out of fear but out of respect." The room was quiet for a moment before one of the managers finally said, "You're right. This could change everything." And change everything it did. Within weeks, small but meaningful adjustments began to appear. Parents were given flexible hours so they could attend school events for their children. A quiet room was created in the office for anyone who needed a break from stress. Weekly meetings were started where employees could openly share ideas without fear of being judged. Slowly, the atmosphere in the company shifted. People who once dreaded walking into work now felt a sense of belonging. The long hallways that had always felt silent and tense were now filled with small conversations and laughter. Employees began greeting one another with more warmth, and even the simplest tasks seemed lighter. The company's culture, which had once been rigid and cold, was becoming human. For Eleanor, these changes also transformed her personally. She found herself smiling more often, not because she forced herself to, but because it felt natural. She noticed how a kind word could brighten someone's day and how a simple thank you could motivate someone more than strict orders ever could. And each time she smiled, she remembered Lily's voice, echoing in her heart, "Mommy needs a smile." Her relationship with Clara also grew. One afternoon, Eleanor called her into her office. Clara entered nervously, worried she had done something wrong. But instead of criticism, Eleanor said, "Clara, I want to thank you. Your daughter reminded me of something I had forgotten. You should be proud of her, and proud of yourself too." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she felt truly seen by her boss. That evening, she went home and hugged Lily tighter than ever, whispering, "You changed more than you know." Outside the office, Eleanor also began to notice changes in herself. She no longer returned home to the same heavy silence. The view from her window looked brighter, not because the city had changed, but because she had. She started keeping a small journal, writing down moments that made her smile each day. Some entries were about employees, some about strangers she met in passing, and some were about her own rediscovered memories of childhood. One evening, as she walked through the lobby, she saw employees gathering around, laughing softly after work. Normally, she would have gone straight past them, lost in her thoughts. But this time, she paused. She stood quietly for a moment, simply watching them. She realized that what she was seeing was not just employees, it was a family of people supporting each other. And she felt proud, not just of the company's achievements, but of the culture it was becoming. Word of these changes began to spread beyond the company. Other businesses started noticing how Eleanor's organization was thriving not only in profits but also in employee satisfaction. Productivity had gone up, not down, and staff turnover had decreased. People were more loyal than ever because they felt valued. Journalists even began writing about the transformation, calling Eleanor's leadership style a balance of strength and compassion. When asked in an interview what had inspired this change, Eleanor smiled gently and replied, "Sometimes, the smallest voices remind us of the biggest truths." She didn't go into details, but she carried the memory of Lily's words in her heart, knowing they had been the spark that started it all. As time went on, Eleanor continued to grow as a leader and as a person. She still had challenges to face, still carried heavy responsibilities, but she no longer felt alone in them. She realized that leadership was not about standing above others, it was about standing with them. And in that simple shift, she found a sense of peace she had been missing for years. At the end of each day, when she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw only the tired, serious woman she once was. She saw a leader who had rediscovered her humanity, a woman who could still smile despite the weight of her duties. And that smile gave her strength, just as her mother had once promised. All because one little girl had taken her hand and reminded her of something priceless. Years passed, but that single moment in the lobby never left Eleanor's heart. The memory of Lily's tiny hand, her clear voice, and her innocent request continued to guide her through every decision she made as a leader. What had begun as a surprising encounter slowly became the foundation of a new way of life, both for Eleanor and for the entire company. The culture of the workplace had transformed. Employees no longer walked into the office with fear written on their faces. Instead, there was a sense of trust, openness, and belonging. The once cold hallways now carried laughter, conversations, and even small celebrations of achievements, both personal and professional. Birthdays were remembered, milestones were honored, and even the smallest contributions were noticed. The company grew stronger than ever before. Productivity rose not because people were afraid of failure but because they genuinely cared about their work and about each other. Investors were pleased, clients were impressed, and competitors began to wonder what secret formula had turned this organization into such a thriving place. But Eleanor knew the truth: it was not a formula, not a strategy from a business book, but the simple reminder of a child's words, "Mommy needs a smile." Eleanor herself had also changed deeply. The once lonely evenings in her apartment were no longer filled with emptiness. She still worked hard, but she also allowed herself to slow down, to breathe, and to notice life outside of her office. Sometimes, after long days, she would take walks through the park, listening to the sound of children playing, watching families laugh together, and feeling connected to the world in a way she had not felt for decades. One summer evening, as she sat on a park bench, she noticed a young family nearby. The father was chasing a toddler while the mother laughed, clapping her hands as the little one ran. Eleanor found herself smiling without even realizing it. She thought of Clara and Lily again, and a wave of gratitude filled her heart. It amazed her how much one small moment could ripple through time and change the direction of an entire life. At the company's annual gathering that year, Eleanor decided to share a story. She stood before hundreds of employees, her voice steady but warm. "There was a time when I believed that success meant being strong, serious, and untouchable," she began. "I thought smiles were a distraction, and kindness was weakness. But I was wrong. One day, someone reminded me that a smile is not just a small gesture, it can be the light someone needs in their darkest moment. It can give strength, hope, and courage." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. Many employees had never heard her speak in such a personal way. "I want you all to know," she continued, "that you matter not just for the work you do here, but for who you are as people. And never underestimate the power of a simple smile. It may seem small, but it can change a life. It certainly changed mine. The audience erupted in applause. Some even had tears in their eyes, touched by the sincerity of their leader. In that moment, Eleanor was no longer just a CEO to them. She was someone who understood, someone who cared, and someone who had walked the same path of struggles and rediscovery. After the event, many employees came up to her to thank her for sharing her story. Some told her about their own experiences, how a smile from a stranger had once helped them, or how they had found hope in the simplest of gestures. Eleanor listened to each of them with patience and compassion, knowing that these connections were what truly built the heart of a company. Her bond with Clara and Lily also remained strong. Clara continued to thrive in her role, now more confident and supported than ever before. She no longer carried the same exhaustion in her eyes, because she knew her workplace respected her responsibilities as a mother. And Lily, growing older each year, still brought her cheerful energy whenever she visited. On one special afternoon, Eleanor invited Clara and Lily to her office for tea. The once intimidating space felt different now, softer, warmer, with fresh flowers by the window and pictures of smiling employees on the shelves. As they sat together, Lily, now a little older, giggled as she sipped her juice. "You smile a lot now," she told Eleanor with the straightforward honesty only a child could have. Eleanor laughed softly. "Yes, and it's because you reminded me how important it is." Clara looked at her daughter with pride and then at her boss with gratitude. "You've changed so much," she said quietly. "I wish you knew what that means to all of us." "I do know," Eleanor replied. "And I will never forget who helped me remember what truly matters." As the years continued, Eleanor became known not only as a successful businesswoman but also as a leader who valued kindness as much as strength. She was often invited to speak at conferences, where she shared her philosophy of leadership. She told audiences that discipline and determination were important, but without compassion, they were incomplete. Leadership, she would say, is not about standing above people. It is about standing with them. And sometimes, it is about bending down to listen to the smallest voices. Every time she said those words, she thought of Lily. That little hand, that innocent sentence, it was the compass that had guided her back to humanity. Even after Eleanor retired years later, the story of her transformation continued to live on in the company. New employees who had never even met her heard the tale from older staff. They learned how a once stern and distant CEO had been changed by a little girl's courage, and how that change had shaped the very heart of their workplace. The story became part of the company's culture, a reminder that behind every desk, behind every role, there was a human being who deserved kindness. And Eleanor, in her quieter years, carried a deep sense of peace. She often visited the park, still watching children play, still smiling at strangers. She kept a framed photograph on her desk at home, one of herself with Clara and Lily, taken on that special afternoon they had shared. Whenever she looked at it, she felt warmth spread through her, a reminder that the greatest changes in life sometimes come from the simplest moments. In the end, it wasn't the big board meetings, the financial victories, or the awards that defined Eleanor's legacy. It was the touch of a small hand, the voice of a child, and the rediscovery of a smile. That moment had given her back her humanity, and with it, she had given hope to thousands of others. And so, the story lived on, a story of a powerful woman humbled by a child's wisdom, of a tired mother lifted by kindness, and of a smile that changed everything.